Hello, friends and readers. This is Kessily Lewel, also known as Sadie Marks. I write power exchange romance novels, basically very steamy relationships with kink, so if that's not your thing, you're probably in the wrong place. Today's segment is going to be about Krampus. In case you have no idea who that is, let me fill you in. Krampus is a mythological figure, basically the opposite of Santa. While Santa brings presents to the good girls and boys, Krampus was the threat parents used on the bad kids. And the story went that Krampus also showed up during the Christmas season, but instead of dispensing gifts, he punished. Usually he's shown with switches or birch rods, sometimes with whips. The stories vary. In some cases, he whipped the bad kids. In others, he stole them away to punish them and they never returned. There are hints maybe he ate them after. Other traditions have him punishing adults too. There are some places where people actually dress up like him and chase everyone around, switching the backs of their legs as they run away. But basically, anyone wicked was risking a visit from Krampus, and trust me, he was the one visitor you didn't want to see during the holidays. The origin of the myth is unclear, but comes from many European countries. Like the Santa stories, it seemed to spring up all over the place. He's usually depicted as being demonic looking, with a long tongue and goat hooves and horns. Some say there's a connection to the pagan wild gods like Pan, and it was co-opted with emerging Christianity and changed like so much mythology at the time. Krampus Day is December 6th, and on that day he comes to find naughty people to punish. Sometimes he arrives with Santa, and they divide everybody up into good and bad. Which brings me to my novella. I'm really excited about this idea. I've planned out an entire series, and I've actually been working out the details for months now. I plan to release one or two a year. They will be connected under the title Krampus Collective, but each will have their own story to tell. But let me tell you about the series first. So we have the Krampus Collective. Originally, there was one Krampus, but as the population on Earth grew, he split up to keep the balance. Now there are 12 of them, connected but individual. They each choose one bad person to steal away for punishment. The victim's pain and tears feed Krampus over the next 12 months. At the end of the year, that person is returned to live a better life. But if they don't, Krampus takes them back and they're never seen again. Probably eaten. Each year, it's a different target, a different theme. One year it might be cheaters, another it might be thieves, another it might be people who spread hurtful gossip. It's all across the spectrum. But they only take people who have a chance at being redeemed, no one truly evil. Their punishment is awful, as you would expect from Krampus. It sometimes involves seeing the people they've hurt, and they're often punished by Krampus, who takes on a semblance of their victims to dispense the justice. That justice can be brutal, and it's not something we'll see in this series, except in vague hints about the past. Because every so often, they decide to take mates. The mates they choose start out like any other sinner at first, except they're chosen to fit Krampus's personal interests and turn-ons rather than some specific sin. These humans are treated differently than the usual. They're still punished, sometimes harshly, but it's tempered with mercy and eventually even love. After all, you can't be cruel to someone you want to spend your life with and then expect them to stay. I mean, it would be really hard to write a romance with Krampus and one of his victims if I wrote it the way the mythology runs. So we're changing it for the mates. So as a result, the punishments they'll receive is more in line with domestic discipline. At the end of the year, these potential mates are given the option to return home like any other, or they can stay and be his mate. If the mate chooses to stay, that Krampus slowly becomes more human over time and begins to age. Their human mate's aging slows down so that they match, and they'll both live a long life. But as they get older, Krampus will begin to think about retiring, and eventually they will return to the human world to live out their days normally together. New, younger copies of Krampus will split off from the original and take over those spots, and the new Krampus will have access to the collective memories of the ones before, so they don't really need training. But they also don't have the same emotional taint as the one who have found mates and grown older with them. So they tend to be harsher and more analytical when new and only relax over time. And once they start to relax, that's when they start thinking about taking a mate. So it's a continuous cycle because love makes them too soft to continue to be the vicious spirit of punishment they're meant to be. I plan for each Krampus to be slightly different from the others, so of course their mate choice will be different and their style of discipline as well. The first book in this series is going to be Daddy Krampus. And believe me, when I say that took me by surprise, that was not in my head when I started, but it fit, and sometimes you just gotta let the characters go with it. So he has a fondness for naughty women who steal things that don't belong to them. When he catches Valerie shoplifting in the mall after work, he gives her one chance to fix the mistake. But when she refuses, he steals her away to his domain for a year. There will be some elements of age play in this because Krampus is all-knowing. He knows every single thing she's stolen in her life, and he intends to give her punishments appropriate for the age she was when she committed every single theft, and she'll be punished for all of them over the course of the year. It seemed like a fun idea to play with. I'm going to wrap this up now by reading a short excerpt. If you like it, please let me know because I'd love to hear your thoughts. Spanking was not the usual form of punishment he used on his victims. There had been a time or two when it had been fitting for specific crimes, but otherwise it simply wasn't appropriate for dispensing the kind of justice that Krampus was known for. Spanking could be harsh, but it was rarely merciless. Of course, things were different with the one he would take to mate, and so her punishment had to be different as well. He didn't want her to be terrified of him. She would, he hoped, choose to stay. That meant he needed to be just severe enough to feed on her. Of course, he also wanted to teach her better behavior, but it had to be tempered with loving discipline that she could learn to appreciate. When he was picking the one who would come home with him, he'd looked into Valerie's heart and soul and found the answer. She was longing for a dominant to take her in hand. She truly wanted to be better, but she couldn't seem to do it on her own. Punishment, discipline, those were the things she craved, and that made her perfect for him. Who would be more suitable for her than the spirit of punishment? How his brothers' selves would pick their mates he couldn't say. Perhaps finding women who crave such things would be the key for them as well. He did intend to suggest it, and since he was connected to the others, that thought became action. Now it was becoming clearer than before that he'd made the right choice. Valerie was exactly what he needed. She was a naughty little vixen with plenty of sins for him to feast on. He could already see how well she was taking to the discipline. It was just enough to give her a painful lesson without leaving her a terrified wreck after. In fact, when he offered her comfort, she seemed to accept it and clung to him. He wasn't used to that. To be sure, his normal victims did not look to him for comfort after he dispensed his punishments. Part of it was probably the fact that he was giving her what she'd been seeking all her life, even before she knew it, but he wondered if it might be the more intimate nature of the punishment as well. Even he was feeling changed by the path he'd chosen. It seemed impossible to hold someone over his lap and spank them like a disappointed parent and still maintain his aloof Krampus decorum. He hadn't been sure during the first spanking, but the second one had clinched it. He was feeling things, emotions. Emotions. As Krampus, he'd lived a long time without being bothered by those. It was expected that they would come to care for their mates, of course. Letting someone in, opening their lives to another did that, and it couldn't be a true mating without it. He just hadn't expected it to hit him so soon. So that's it. That's an excerpt from the first novella. Probably will only have time to release one this year, although I had wanted to try for two. But I'm really happy with the idea of the collective and the individual stories. So if you see me on social media or if you want to leave a comment here, I would love to know what you think about it. I'm going to sign off now, and please remember, stay safe out there. It's a scary year, and if you can, stay home. See you soon. Bye.